Hey everybody! Mockingbird, chapter 26. I don't think I've worn this shirt yet. If I did, pretend I haven't. Here's my next Atticus shirt, my next Mockingbird shirt. I think it's also a band, but it's Atticus, so it doesn't matter. It's just Atticus. 25 was a short chapter. Our scout goes to smash a roly-poly and Jem stops her. We see Jem learning and kind of understanding empathy and the idea of mockingbirds. We get the kids see, or Jem and Dill see Atticus tell Helen that Tom is dead. And then we get that opinion article that Mr. Underwood wrote comparing Tom's death to a mockingbird. Talk about the symbol of a mockingbird and how Tom represents that because he only tried to do good. And we also end with that threat from Bob Ewell. 26, here we go. This is the end of the summer. School started, and so did our daily trips past the Radley place. Jem was in the 7th grade and went to the high school beyond the grammar school building. I was now in the 3rd grade, and our routines were so different. I only walked to school with Jem in the mornings and Tom at mealtimes. He went out for football, but was too slender and too young yet to do anything but carry the team water buckets. This he did with enthusiasm. Most afternoons he was seldom home before dark. Oh, that Jem and his football love. Do you remember? Just pause. Do you remember what this whole story is about? I haven't talked about this in a while. It's the very first line of the book. When he was nearly 13, my brother Jem got his arm badly broken at the elbow. Remember that? Because it had to do with football, that's why I remembered it. The Radley place had ceased to terrify me, but it was no less gloomy, no less chilly under its great oaks, and no less uninviting. Mr. Nathan Radley could still be seen on a clear day walking to and from town. We knew Boo was there for the same reason. Nobody'd seen him carried out yet. I sometimes felt a twinge of remorse when passing by the old place at ever having taken part in what must have been sheer torment to Arthur Radley. What reasonable recluse wants children peeping through his shutters, delivering greetings on the end of a fishing pole, and wandering in his collards at night? She's grown a little. And yet I remembered 2 Indian head pennies, chewing gum, soap dolls, a rusty medal, a broken watch and chain. Jem must have put them away somewhere. I stopped and looked at the tree one afternoon. The trunk was swelling around its cement patch. The patch itself was turning yellow. We had almost seen him a couple of times, a good enough score for anybody. But I still looked for him each time I went by. Maybe someday we would see him. I imagined how it would be. When it happened, he'd just be sitting on the swing when I came along. "How do you do, Mr. Arthur?" I would say, as if I had said it every afternoon of my life. "Evening, Jean Louise," he would say, as if he had said it every afternoon of my life. "Right pretty spell we're having, isn't it?" "Yes, sir, right pretty," I would say and go on. It was only a fantasy. We would never see him. He probably did go out when the moon was down and gaze upon Miss Stephanie Crawford. I'd have picked someone else to look at, but that was his business. He would never gaze at us. "You aren't starting that again, are you?" said Atticus one night, when I expressed a stray desire just to have one good look at Boo Radley before I died. "If you are, I'll tell you right now, stop it. I am too old to go chasing you off the Radley property. Besides, it's dangerous. You might get shot. You know Mr. Nathan Radley shoots at every shadow he sees, even shadows that leave size 4 bare footprints. You were lucky not to be killed." I hushed then and there. At the same time, I marveled at Atticus. This was the first time he had let us know he knew a lot more about something than we thought he knew. And it happened years ago. No, only last summer. No, the summer before last, when time was playing tricks on me. I must remember to ask Jem. So many things had happened to us. Boo Radley was the least of our fears. Atticus said he didn't see how anything else could happen, that things had a way of settling down, and after enough time had passed, people would forget that Tom Robinson's existence was ever brought to their attention. Perhaps Atticus was right, but the events of the summer hung over us like smoke in a closed room. The adults in Macomb never discussed the case with Jem and me. It seemed that they discussed it with their children, and their attitude must have been that neither of us could help having Atticus for a parent, so their children must be nice to us, in spite of him. The children would have never thought that up for themselves. Had our classmates been left to their own devices, Jem and I would have had several swift, satisfying fistfights apiece, and ended the matter for good. As it was, we were compelled to hold our heads high and be, respectively, a gentleman and a lady. In a way, it was like the era of Mrs. Henry Lafayette DeBose, without all her yelling. There was one odd thing, though, that I never understood. In spite of Atticus's shortcomings as a parent, people were content to re-elect him to the state legislature that year, as usual, without opposition. I came to the conclusion that people were just peculiar. I withdrew from them and never thought about them until I was forced to. Scout makes an interesting point there. They criticize Atticus. They criticize, the way he stood up for Tom and why he did that and their beliefs with that. But every year when he runs for re-election, they elect him. Why? Because he's good, because they believe in him, because despite all of that, they know that he's a good person, because they know that they're wrong, maybe? Probably not. Next part of this chapter. I was forced to one day in school. Once a week, we had a current events period. Each child was supposed to clip an item from a newspaper, absorb its contents, and reveal them to the class. This practice allegedly overcame a variety of evils. Standing in front of his fellows encouraged good posture and gave a child poise. Delivering a short talk about him made him word conscious. Learning his current events strengthened his memory, and being singled out made him more than ever anxious to return to the group. We're going to have to talk about this. So we talked about school in the beginning and how everything's backwards and broken and ridiculous and comical. So this is the same thing. So I'm sure that you've had to do current events in your lifetime, right? Where you pick some newspaper, write about it, and or turn it in or present about it. So what are you supposed to get from that experience? You're supposed to get a knowledge of the world, some writing practice, some understanding, some practice in public speaking, right? Eye contact, those things. So this is what she says that they learn. Let's see. Standing in front of your peers, the public speaking, encouraged good posture. So you're supposed to learn how to stand up straight. Delivering a short talk made him word conscious. You're supposed to learn about words. And learning his current event strengthened his memory. None of that is about learning. That's kind of the irony of it. Okay, onward. The idea was profound, but as usual in Maycomb, it didn't work very well. In the first place, few rural children had access to newspapers, so the burden of current events was borne by the town children, convincing the bus children more deeply that the town children got all the attention anyway. The rural children, who could, usually brought clippings from what they called the grit paper, a publication spurious in the eyes of Miss Gates, our teacher. Why she frowned when a child recited from the grit paper, I never knew. But in some way, it was associated with liking fiddling, eating syrupy biscuits for lunch, being a holy roller, singing Sweetly Sings the Donkey and pronouncing it donkey, all of which the state paid teachers to discourage. Even so, not many of the children knew what a current event was. Little Chuck Little, 100 years old in his knowledge of cows and their habits, was halfway through an Uncle Natchel story when Miss Gates stopped him. Charles, that is not a current event. That is an advertisement. Cecil Jacob knew what one was, though. When his turn came, he went to the front of the room and began, Old Hitler. Adolf Hitler, Cecil, Miss Gates corrected. One never begins with old anybody. Yes, ma'am, he said. Old Adolf Hitler has been persecuting, Cecil, interrupted Miss Gates. No, Miss Gates, it says here. Well, anyway, old Adolf Hitler has been after the Jews, and he's putting them in prisons, and he's taking away all their property, and he won't let any of them out of the country, and he's washing all the feeble-minded. Washing the feeble-minded? She asked. Yes, ma'am, Miss Gates. I reckon they don't have sense enough to wash themselves. I don't reckon an idiot could keep himself clean. Well, anyway, Hitler started a program to round up all the half-Jews, too, and he wants to register them in case they want to cause him any trouble. And I think this is a bad thing, and that is my current event. Very good, Cecil, said Miss Gates. Puffing, Cecil returned to his seat. A hand went up in the back of the room. I lost my spot. How can he do that? Who do what? Asked Miss Gates patiently. I mean, how can Hitler put a lot of folks in a pen like that? Looks like the government had stopped him, said the owner of the hand. Hitler is the government. said Miss Gates, and seizing an opportunity to make education dynamic, that's sarcastic, she went to the blackboard. She printed democracy in large letters. Democracy, she said. Does anybody have a definition? Us, somebody said. I raised my hand, remembering an old campaign slogan Atticus had once told me about. What do you think it means, Jean Louise? Equal rights for all, special privileges for none, I quoted. Very good, Jean Louise, very good. Miss Gates smiled. In front of democracy, she printed, We are a. Now, class, say it together. We are a democracy. We said it. Then Miss Gates said, That's the difference between America and Germany. We are a hypocrisy. We are a democracy, sorry. And Germany is a dictatorship. Dictatorship, she said. Over here, we don't believe in persecuting anybody. Persecution comes from people who are prejudiced. Prejudice, she enunciated carefully. There are no better people in the world than the Jews, and why Hitler doesn't think so is a mystery to me. An inquiring soul in the middle of the room said, Why don't they like the Jews, you reckon, Miss Gates? I don't know, Henry. They contribute to every society they live in, and most of all, they're a deeply religious people. Hitler's trying to do away with religion, so maybe he doesn't like them for that reason. Cecil spoke up. Well, I don't know for certain, he said. They're supposed to change money or something, but that ain't no cause to persecute them. They're white, ain't they? Miss Gates said, When you get to high school, Cecil, you'll learn that the Jews have been persecuted since the beginning of history, even driven out of their own country. It's one of the most terrible stories in all of history. Time for arithmetic, children. Okay, pause. Um, Over here, we don't believe in persecuting anybody. Persecution comes from people who are prejudiced. Prejudiced, children. Seriously, right? That's kind of the point, right? Talk about school being backwards. Here it's backwards, so far backwards that she's claiming that we aren't prejudiced at all, despite the fact that what just happened. Hypocrisy. If you're writing an essay on hypocrisy, this is an example you want to use. As I had never liked arithmetic, I spent the entire period looking out the window. The only time I ever saw Atticus scowl was when Elmer Davis would give us the latest on Hitler. Atticus would snap off the radio and say, I asked him once why he was impatient with Hitler, and Atticus said, because he's a maniac. That would not do, I mused as the class proceeded with its sums. One maniac and millions of German folks. Looked to me like they'd shut Hitler in a pen instead of letting him shut them up. There was something else wrong. I would ask my father about it. I did, and he said he could not possibly answer my question because he didn't know the answer. But it's okay to hate Hitler? It is not, Atticus said. It is not okay to hate anybody. Atticus, I said, there's something I don't understand. Miss Gates said it was awful, Hitler doing like he does. She got real red in the face about it. I should think she would. But, yes. Nothing, sir. I went away, not sure that I could explain to Atticus what was on my mind, not sure that I could clarify what was only a feeling. Perhaps Jem could provide an answer. Jem understood school things better than Atticus. Jem was worn out from a day's water carrying. There were at least 12 banana peels on the floor by his bed, surrounding an empty milk bottle. What you stuffing for? I asked. Coach says if I can gain 25 pounds by year after next, I can play, he said. That's the quickest way. If you don't throw it all up. Jem, I said, I want to ask you something. Shoot. He put his book down and stretched his legs. Miss Gates is a nice lady, ain't she? Why, sure, said Jem. I liked her when I was in her room. She hates Hitler a lot. What's wrong with that? Well, she went on today about how bad it was him treating the Jews like that. Jem, it's not right to persecute anybody, is it? I mean, have mean thoughts about anybody even, is it? Gracious no, Scout, what has eaten you? Well, coming out of the courthouse that night, Miss Gates she was going down the steps in front of you. You must have not seen her. She was talking with Miss Stephanie Crawford. I heard her say, it's time somebody taught him a lesson. They were getting way above themselves, and the next thing they think they can do is marry us. Jem, how can you hate Hitler so bad and then turn around and be ugly about folks right at home? Suddenly, Jem was furious. He leaped off of the bed, grabbed me by the collar, and shook me. I never want to hear about that courthouse again. Ever. Ever. You hear me? You hear me? Don't you ever say one word to me about it again. You hear? Now go on. I was too surprised to cry. I crept from Jem's room and shut the door softly, lest any undue noise set him off again. Suddenly tired, I wanted Atticus. He was in the living room, and I went to him and tried to get into his lap. Atticus smiled. You're getting so big now, I'll just have to hold a part of you. He held me close. Scout, he said softly, don't let Jem get you down. He's having a rough time these days. I heard you back there. Atticus said that Jem was trying hard to forget something, but what he was really doing was storing it away for a while until enough time had passed. Then he would be able to think about it and sort things out. When he was able to think about it, Jem would be himself again. A few things to talk about. So this, I need a little water. This display of hypocrisy, Scout can't understand it. And it takes her a while to put the two pieces together, and then she finally asks, she's like, Jem, I don't get it. Like she said this about persecuting people, but like I watched her. These are the things she said this about the black folks. Like, how can these two things be true? I don't understand. And Jem reacts physically. He's angry, and he says, don't talk to me about it. The last paragraph here, and I'm going to read it again to you a minute. It's kind of how we all deal with grief. It's kind of the human reaction to grief. And for just a second, I want you, this is kind of an awful thing, but I want you to think about the most difficult thing that you've ever had to endure. Think about that. I want you to get like one word to describe it. I don't care what it is. Got it? I'd say write it on a piece of paper. That's what I usually make you do if you're in class. Just one word. Now, think about it. Think about how you dealt with that and listen to this. Atticus said that what we're really doing is that we're trying hard to forget something. Well, hold on. Let me say that again. Atticus said that we are trying hard to forget something, but what we're really doing is storing it away for a while until enough time passes. When enough time passes, we'll be able to think about it and sort things out. When you're able to think about it or talk about it, then you'll be yourself again. Right? Tough things require discussion. And in the beginning of that tough stuff, you're not ready to have that conversation. You're not ready to put those feelings into words. And Jem is not ready to talk about it. He is hurt by that, and he is still trying to process his own feelings. And he doesn't want to talk about it. And Atticus says that's how that works, right? He's trying to forget it. But what he's really doing is putting it on a shelf until he can deal with it and think about it. And when he can deal with it and think about it, then he will be able to be himself again. It's kind of what we all do. That is the end of chapter 26. Only a few more left.